Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today I want to show you 4 additional lists I've been working on from the new set Jump to Lightspeed. This video is sponsored by Card Market, the biggest marketplace in Europe to buy and sell cards. So we'll start right away here from the first list I've been working on is a Dooku Yellow list. Dooku Yellow was already a deck that I think was quite decent in set 3. It was a deck that, in my opinion, was the best way to run Dooku. It's a deck that got a lot stronger with this new set for multiple reasons. So, first of all, what made Dooku Yellow a decent deck already in set 1 was the fact that you got access to, obviously, to a built-in exploits. Exploit cards are not so good. However, if you can give any separatist units in your deck exploits, then any separatist card can potentially become very powerful. Very powerful. And then you got as you reach the later stage of the game, you got the very powerful Change of Heart combo where you get to steal an opponent units and then you get to use that unit and then defeat that unit using Dooku's ability. So it's sort of kind of like Palpatine's Yellow, but even stronger because you don't even need 7 resources to make that happen. You just need the 6 resources, then use Dooku's ability and you get rid of it. That's a very, very powerful ability because it's basically it's kind of like a no glory only result that costs 1 more resources, but you get to attack with the unit as you steal it, which I think is very, very potent. So, and of course you get to exploit it, which also gives you a discount on the card that you might want to play. So that was already something that I think there were already something pretty powerful going on here, but there is just so much that happened since then in terms of the amount of content. So in terms of 2-drops here, we got a mixture between basically 2 kinds of 2-drop. We got the 2-drop that are here to be exploited. So we got the Comforted Courier that leaves a droids when he leaves play. We got the Kilometer Patroller, which is a new way to get 2 1/1s on turn 1. Before, we only had access to droid deployments to make that happen. Now we can make that happen with Kilometer Patrollers, which obviously gives gives a 1/1 in space, which are slightly less vulnerable. Obviously that comes down to the meta, but it's definitely like nice to have more redundancy on that specific thing. And then we got 2-drops which are not, in my opinion, the most amazing 2-drops in the game, Separatist Commando and B1 Security Team. But we do need to have a certain mass of 2-drops because we get to play them for free using the Invisible Hand. So obviously those are not necessarily the 2-drops that you're looking for the most as your turn 1 play. B1 Security Team can be pretty good depending on the matchup. You just don't want to play against anything that can ping. Separatist Commando is a lot worse, but if you can grab it later on in the game, then it becomes a lot better because all you need to do is having another Separatist unit and it becomes a 4-3, which is pretty nice. So we got basically this early game plan here. We got almost a really good consistency because we got ourselves like 14 turn 1 play and all of them are pretty decent. And then basically on the 2-drop, we got obviously the Droid Commando, which is always nice. The 4-3 on the ground ambush is really strong against aggro. It's something that we've been seeing and the fact that you can play it potentially with a discounted price is also nice. So let's say on turn you can just open up Comforted Courier, use the Kondoku's ability, ambush something, leave a 1/1 behind, and you can play a 2-drop alongside this. We can do the same thing with Elite P38, which I think is going to be very well positioned. Obviously, depending on the meta, you might want to play P38 over Commando. Once again, the meta is still kind of not super established, so that's why I wouldn't necessarily adapt the list depending on what you're facing. But the idea is pretty much there, is to have some sort of interactive turn 2 play. Then we also have the Infiltrator Demolisher, which we can actually play on turn 1 if you either run Canadian Patrollers, Android deployments. Then you get to give him Exploit 2 thanks to Dooku, and you get to play it on the 4-5 Saboteur turn 1, which in some matchup can be very powerful as well. Then other than this, we basically playing, of course, a bit of interaction here with the Waylays. Overwhelming Barrage, obviously very powerful in kind of deck as you get to play very, very big units very early on. And we also have a lot of very powerful turn 2 plays simply by just exploiting and getting the discounts thanks to Kondoku, we can actually play invincible as early as turn 2. And we also can do the same thing with Techno Union Transport, which is a 4-6 shielded. 4-6 shielded is very well positioned in the meta. Shielded is very strong because it means it cannot be tapped by Django. 4 means that he avoids Fail the Dragon. 6 Hell means that he dodges takedown, so it's not an easy unit to kill, especially early on in the game. And it's going to put quite a beating on the opponent, and the fact you can play it as early as turn 2 is very powerful. So Techno Union Transport is a card that really got overlooked, but anything that has the separate tag, you always have to consider it in the context of a Dooku list. So near this, we also of course got some more interactive 5-drop like the Geozen Patrol Fighter, which can bounce a unit and can be discounted even further. We got the Patrol 8080 if we need to stabilize the ground. And obviously we got Triple Dark Raid, which is amazing in this deck. As there's so many great targets, we can play Triple Dark Raid on curve just for 3. We can grab Patrol 8080, Invincible, or Techno Union Transport. So it's really a really decent turn 2 play, honestly. It's something you can really play for turn 2 if you need. Let's say you would need like something to interact with your opponent to deal a bunch of damage, that kind of thing. And then if you want to play it for 4, you can either grab the Resupply Carrier, which will ramp us towards the Count Dooku, and then the Invincible Hand, which will allow us to get some extra droids. So you might be very surprised to not see Super Laser Technician, which seems to be kind of a no-brainer in a deck like this. But after testing, I always found the card to be relatively slow, honestly, compared to what this deck is capable of doing. I feel like this deck very often on turn 2 really wants to play either Techno Union Transport or Invincible on turn 2. Doesn't really want to mess around with necessarily trying to ramp up. So I felt like the card was not necessarily the best. If you're playing as, you either want to interact with your opponent with a Commando or a P38, or you wanted to ramp directly into, directly put something really big on the board. So I just felt like the card was not just doing so well in the deck. Maybe with further testing, the Super Laser Dictionary will end up going back in the deck, but for now I decided to not play it. Which I know is going to be surprising. So obviously we play the Change of Heart, which is our late game kind of removal, and we also have, of course, a Reinforcement Walker, which is always an absolute amazing banger out of Triple Dark Raid. So this is basically kind of the main deck. As you can see, it got a lot going on. The Invisible Hand is obviously the whole star of this deck, as it's amazing with Triple Dark Raid, as it comes into play, gets yourself a 2-drop. I mean, we also have other droids, so it's almost always going to hit, whether it's putting a 2-drop into play or just draws us a droids. And then the tax gets to trigger the ability again, so you can potentially just, when you get this on Triple Dark Raid, so as early as turn 3, you get yourself a swing at 6, and you get to put 2 drops droids on the board in the same turn, which is just incredible in terms of power level. Getting all those early units makes Overwhelming Barrage extremely powerful in this deck, and I even considered running Turbo Laser Salvo. This is actually something you could consider in this deck, to be running Turbo Laser Salvo. So it is something similar than obviously a Piett. The Kondoku late deployment is still kind of an issue for this deck, but the rest of the deck is just so powerful that I think it's a deck that has really good chances of seeing some play. It's going to take time to find the ideal build for this deck because there's so many options. It's kind of hard to know which one. Maybe the right play is to not play Invisible Hand and maybe get rid of some of the 2-drops, some of the quote-unquote bad 2-drops, or maybe the right play is just to play full-on ramp, play the Resupply, play the Super Laser Technician. There's tons of different directions you can go, but this is currently what I've been testing. This is a list that was mostly inspired by Beton, which, as you know, is my teammate for the Team Enigma, and he's been playtesting the gate quite a bit, and this is kind of what he's landed on, and this is kind of I've modified a few things, made a few changes, but there's basically kind of where we ended on for this deck. Obviously, there's still plenty of improvement to be made. So that's basically my Dooku list. If you want to pick up an Invisible Hand on card market, this card is only €2. I'm expecting the card to go even lower than this, but I think the price is low enough that you can even pick them up right now if you're not intending to buy booster box of the deck. You can buy singles on card market for just very cheap price. Rares are still very cheap in this deck, as you can see. Then I want to show a list that probably everybody has thought about, or at least or even played, and this is basically Piett Red, but I wanted to show you my specific version of the deck. So as you can see, my version is extremely light on early game plays, because obviously the most likely what you're going to be doing on turn 1 is just to skip your turn 1 and then either play a ramp or play a removal to get rid of the opponent's unit you're facing. So this is something that, like, the play pattern that you're kind of adopting in early stage of the game is to kind of play, of course, the control game, and then you're going to be ramping very, very quickly in those very, very large spaceship, and you're just going to overwhelm your opponent with a million different spaceship and completely. And so this is a deck that is quite slow at the beginning, but then picks up in speed as soon as Admiral Piett deploys, which can happen as early as turn 3, sorry, and can happen as early as turn 3. And then at this point, the deck really kind of just hammers the opponent every turn with giant threats with immediate impact on the game, and I can just attack and kill the opponent very quickly. So currently, so this is the build I've landed on. So as you can see, I still play like the Celestial Scrum early on. I think Celestial Scrum just a way to kind of heal, also a way to kind of play around Power Dark Side. It's kind of very important to have like kind of those cheap units that can here to absorb the Power Dark Sides of even Merciless Contest or Avenger, that kind of thing. It obviously heals the base, come back into hand, heals the base, and it combines, of course, deal 1 damage to something, so then you can finish them with an Open Fire or Daring Raid. There's a lot of 1 health units whenever you're playing against Django, so this is like a really, really strong card against Django early on that loves to play those 3-1s unit that puts a lot of pressure on you, that might kill you just way too quickly if you don't have an answer for them. We have a lot of ways to ping. This is a specific version that was built specifically to beat Django, as I'm also playing IG-2000, is another way to kind of ping multiple units and kill those 1 health units. We also have Outlaw Corona. This card is this is a card that may sound amazing on Admiral Piett, because you can basically play a 3-5 in space on turn 1, but the bounty is just a very, very major downside. So personally, I only advise you to play this card against an aggro deck or something that you know does not really benefit so much from the ramp. And in this case, turn 1 Outlaw Corona will really help you dealing with notably all those the Poe decks, the Sabine decks that open them in space, or those Luke decks that really want to attack with a fighter. You can play Outlaw Corona and you can kind of interact with their early game. Especially if you play first, you open up with Outlaw Corona, you can kind of kill every single 2-drop in space they will possibly play, and that's going to put you very far ahead. Since we play very few early game units, we play Merciless Contest, because it's the only way in that color combination to kill very, very large units. So obviously sometimes it's going to be a little bit awkward to play, but in the early stage of the game, this is kind of the only way for us to one-shot something that has 5 health, and as you know, if you're playing in something like Han, there's going to be a lot of 5 health units you want to get rid of. So really playing ramp, focusing on the ramp control. Obviously ramping turn 2 makes a huge difference, so you get your Piett 1 turn earlier, which makes a huge difference. So you're going to be trying to ramp on turn 2 as often as humanly possible. Keep in mind, another advantage of playing Celestial Scrum, and the reason why I think you should play Celestial Scrum in this deck, is because Celestial Scrum can actually kill your own Super Laser Technician, which can be a problem because now there's a lot of people who play in space. So if you go turn 1 Crum, turn 2 Technician, your opponent does not want to interact with your Technician, well, you can just use Crum to kill your own Technician and ramp anyway, which is, in my opinion, quite a good play. So going into the spaceship, we're running the AIM-330 because it is the best 5-drop spaceship that you can run in this color combination that allows us to play something for 4 resources, especially when we don't get to ramp. This allows us to play something, a 4-drop that is obviously very strong. If you get like 6-5, overwhelm for 4, it's just very strong. So it can kind of trade with it can actually trade with the Restless Raiders and stuff for such a cheap price and puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. Overwhelm Barrage is obviously the best card in the deck. It's a way to take advantage of playing those massive units. If you wonder, I still believe Overwhelm Barrage is the best card in Star Wars Unlimited. And it's even better with this new set when there's so many ways to just put those large units into play. We're obviously playing the Resupply Carrier as a way to ramp up stuff further. The Ruthless Raider, obviously, still one of the best card one of the best capital ship in the game. Obviously, so Turboless those salvos are basically acting as extra copies of Overwhelming Barrage. Not as good as Barrage, but Barrage is so important in this deck that sometimes you just want more chances to find those very important cards that allows you to take advantage of you running a unit, running those spaceship and being able to play them early on. Architen, one of the reasons why red is, I don't necessarily think, so there's obviously you can run Admiral Piett with yellow or with blue. Blue is going to give you a better time stabilizing the early stage of the game. Yellow is going to give you access to triple dark raid, and red gives you access to the best finisher with obviously Devastator, the new Devastator. We're running the old and the new Devastator both in 3 copies. Those cards are just so incredibly important because they are insanely overpowered whenever you get to discount them for 2 resources. Architects is also an excellent card in this deck. It's immediate impact on the game. Now in today's meta where there's a lot more space units, having a space ambush is actually not that bad anymore because it often is going to find something to kill, and if it does, it's going to ramp you. The fact that we get to discount it heavily is a big deal. Being able to kill a Resuscitator without dying on the way back and ramping yourself at the same time is just incredible. And obviously icing on the king, we're running Planetary Bombardments. This is a card, and you need to find the right spot to play it, but in the right spot is absolutely incredible. Let's say if the opponent has a lot of units, he's gonna the Planetary Bombardment is gonna absorb a lot of damage on his unit, but then you can just finish them off with a raider, with a daring raid. We have so many ways to kind of deal damage to finish off units. So having your opponent just deals a lot of damage to his own units to make them very weak is actually not bad for us. We can just run Devastator, or even it makes Barrage extremely powerful. And obviously there's going to be a situation where your opponent is going to have very few units in play while everything is going to go to face. Planetary Bombardment gives you a good matchup against Control because this card can just come out of nowhere and deal 8 to 12 damage, which is very, very strong. And we got a very solid sideboard against Control with the Palpatine's Returns, Relentless, the Bombing Run against Aggro, and a couple of Confiscate for decks who like to play those upgrades. And this is my version of Piett. I've been having a lot of fun with the deck. I think the deck is very powerful. Once again, I don't pretend that this is the best version, but this is what I've been landing on. So currently Devastator basically goes for 23 euros on card market. I wouldn't advise you to buy a Devastator at this stage. I think the card is a little bit overpriced. I mean, the price is not outrageous if you think about that. It's going to be a card that's going to see a lot more play than Now There's Two of Them, and Now There's Two of Them was going for about 23 euros, so it's not a bad deal, but I'm pretty sure the price is going to lower a little bit as time goes by, but I could be wrong, we'll see. Then we got Palpatine Blue. Palpatine Blue is another deck that got some significant upgrade. It's a deck that basically got some significant upgrade in set 3, and now is getting, again, some really significant upgrades in set 4. As we know, Palpatine Blue is the one of the most powerful deck in the game. The only problem with this deck is obviously it's very weak to aggro. But we got a lot of help on that domain with set 4, notably of course with the new base Colossus, which gives us 5 additional health without, and the only downside is that you gotta start the game with 1 less card. So among all the different decks that exist, I believe that Palpatine is probably the deck that is the most suited to be playing with fewer cards in hand in your opponent's hand. And the reason is because in the early stage of the game, the only major thing you're looking for is either a ramp, if you're running against other control decks or other mid-range deck, or if you are running against aggro, you're looking for removal. So it's like, and because there's a lot of redundancy of removals and ramp in this deck, it's really not that starting the game with only one less card is not really that big of a deal. It's not like you need to curve perfectly for the works to operate properly. And obviously the 5 extra HP is a huge help because it obviously delays the game enough so you can actually get your deployments with Palpatine. And obviously combined with all of the control tools that the deck has and the heal, you're kind of trying to delay the game as much as possible. So this is my opinion. And obviously because you are the Palpatine's ability that allows you to draw cards, you actually can really make up for the fewer cards that you're starting with. You can make up for that with the Palpatine's ability. So this is just, there's a lot of cool elements that makes this very interesting. So what are we going for? What are the other kind of big upgrades for this deck? The other one is the Director Krennic. Director Krennic is great in this deck. It's a 2/2 shielded that will interact with those early game units. And then just you can finish them off using Palpatine, so sometimes they just have 1 health, so you can just kill them right away. And this also, we are playing a few units that have when defeated effect. We're playing Inferno 4, we're playing Super Laser Technician, and being able to go like turn 1 Krennic, turn 2 War Trade Official, another one that's when defeated effect, plus Inferno 4 on turn 2, so you can really kind of have some very explosive starts. And having some really explosive start like this can be very useful, because obviously if you can dominate the early game, you almost guaranteed to be able to get to the late game, and to that point you are going to be in a very good position because you're playing one of the greediest deck in the game. So yeah, and of course the thing, you empty your hand very quickly, but you also put a lot of units on the battlefield that you can then sacrifice, get the when defeated effect, draw some cards with Palpatine, and kind of make up for the fact that you've emptied your hand very quickly. So I think this early game is really nice, with a War Trade Official that gives you folder for the Palpatine ability that gets discounted by Krennic, and then you also get to play Emperor's Royal Guard on turn 2, where it can really block the ground arena very well against aggressive decks that plays on the ground. And because Krennic is an official, you of course get the Sentinel keywords. So Emperor's Palpatine is quite consistent in this deck, because we're playing 3 War Trade Official and 3 Krennics. And we even play officials that will be more expensive, like the Client, which is a way for us to get some recursive heal as well. The rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect from a Palpatine Blue, with 2 copies of No Glory Only Result, because this card is going to be very important in the current meta, where there's lots of very powerful when defeated effect. So the rest of the deck is pretty much what you expect. It's really the early game that has changed, as well as the fact that we're playing the new base. And I think this deck is very, very solid. Currently, No Glory Only Result only goes for €1.93, so kind of a card I think is going to see a lot of play, so it's nice to put your hands on them relatively early on. And then we got my special, of course, a deck that probably a lot of people have been expected from me, because obviously this Han Green has always been and remains my favorite deck to play in Star Wars Unlimited, and I've decided to show you this specific version that I've been cooking. This is a vehicle focus Han Green deck with a combo plan B, which is really exciting. So let me first introduce you what is the big difference between this deck and a traditional Han Green. So obviously, the result of playing, of course, of transitioning to Jump to Lightspeed is that we are basically running much more space focus. The reason we're doing this is because, of course, there's a lot of great new spaceship, and because of the new Han Solo. So the plan is to either in the early stage of the game is to start up with either 3-5, so if your opponent opens up space, we can do Blue Leader is amazing upgrade for Han. I think Blue Leader is much stronger in Han than it is in other deck, because you have more flexibility, you can play it on turn 1, which can be very powerful against Sabine. I think Han Green was kind of weak against Sabine in my opinion, so Blue Leader really helps a ton against Sabine, as you get to play this on turn 1 against a space unit. Now opening up space against us is basically suicidal, which is like a very good place to be. Your opponent is either going to get punished in space or even on the ground as we go. Of course, turn 1 DJ is still very strong against Sabine, that kind of thing. And then later on in the game, we can play it for 5, and then as a 5/5, you get to snipe a Sabine, get to snipe a Cassian. And once again, we get to play it 1 turn earlier with Han, so it's very strong. It's really good to get out of U-Wing reinforcement as well. It's a very flexible card to get out of U-Wing reinforcement, so there's just so many good things going on with this card. It's just really, really good, especially in this deck. So then we're still running the DJ Tech combo, not because DJ Tech combo is particularly like something we do very consistently in this deck, but at least the threat of it is kind of threatening for the opponent. But more importantly, just 3-5 for 3 is just very good, and then the tech is just very good because we do empty our hands pretty quickly in this deck, so we like to have a lot of smuggle. Han always loved to play a lot of smuggle. Then we run 2 different versions of the Falcon. I like the Falcon here because it's like a solid card that you want to play on turn 1, as opposed to the Falcon is kind of awkward to play early on, because then you got to play the Falcon tax. It's a bit annoying, while the Falcon is really a solid card to play on turn 1. And it obviously combines very well. As you equip Han Solo on this, you can actually attack something for 6 health. So you can snipe a fire spray, you can snipe of course, a Ruthless Raider. That's very, like, I think it's very, very, very powerful. So we don't really play that many pilots, but it's just the combo with Han Solo is just so powerful that I think it's worth running. And as I said, a 3-4 for 3 on turn 1 in space is not bad at all. We're basically running all 9 copies of Falcon, so to increase our chances to be able to combine it with Han. And all those 3 cards, even independently from Han, all 3 of those cards are really, really solid cards. And obviously the flexibility of being able to run Han Solo as a 4-5 ambush is also very good. So this is a deck that has a lot of flexibility because it has cards like Han Solo and Brew Leaders that can operate either on the ground or in space depending on the situation. Bright Hope is just very strong against Django, so we need it for protection. And then from that point on, then we have a couple of interactions where, of course, the resupply is super necessary to get into our fast Han Solo. And obviously a bunch of 7 drops for our U-Wing reinforcement. We have even more diversity than before in terms of different 7 drops that we can run. We're playing the Cad Bane just great out of U-Wing reinforcement. We're running the Luke Skywalker. We're running the Tantive 4 as ways to have some Sentinels and some bigger Sentinels in space. The Han Solo, which is going to become a little bit worse in this new meta, as obviously there's some decks that simply just don't play on the ground, so it makes Han Solo worse. But I still think it's amazing in the mirror match, so you need to play it. And then we got Enfys Nest, so we got a nice kind of toolbox of different 7 drops that we can pull off our U-Wing reinforcement, even though obviously reinforcement can also pick up a collection of different 3 drops and 4 drops on the ground as well. So what I really like about Cad Bane and Luke Skywalker is that obviously they're a great pull out of U-Wing reinforcement. Obviously you can also outcast it for 9, it's not the end of the world. But what I also really love is that they're actually great pull to get out of Endless Legion. And you're going to tell me, why are we playing Endless Legion in this deck? Well, very simple, is because we're running 3 copies of Starhawk. Starhawk is just insane in this deck. Obviously, it's a massive ambush unit with immediate impact that has a lot of health. It does cost 9, which is quite expensive, but as you know, Han Solo can ramp us and get this one out a little bit easier. But once this unit is in play, then suddenly everything you can play for half the cost. And Starhawk is particularly powerful with 2 things. If you play a deck with a lot of expensive cards, Starhawk become better. We definitely do that. We have a lot of 7 drops because of U-Wing reinforcement and the toolbox for U-Wing reinforcement. We play a lot of 7 drops, which inevitably makes Starhawk better because now we get massive discounts on all of our units. And the other thing that Starhawk is really good at is smuggle, because there's nothing worse than having a Starhawk and having no cards in hand, so you really don't really benefit from the ability. But if you actually have a tech, then you can start basically completely overwhelming the opponent. And keep in mind though that the Starhawk gives you a discount on the unit, but also on the smuggle, because the smuggle cost gets to be added on top of the cost, so it's still the cost of the unit. So let's say if you want to smuggle something like a Battlefield Marine, the Battlefield Marine is going to cost you 2. And this discount becomes bigger as you obviously try to cast bigger units. Like you want to smuggle something like a Tantive 4, you're going to get to pay 5 for it, which is very nice, very cheap. But obviously, the main elephant in the room, of course, is the combination between Starhawk and Endless Legion. So if you play Starhawk for 9, then you can actually play Endless Legion for 8, which is completely bananas. That means that if Starhawk survive and you have Endless Legion in hand, you basically win the game, because then you just completely flood the board with a bunch of units. And we have a lot of great cards to pull from Endless Legion. You get the Cad Bane to get rid of everything. You get to put some Sentinels in space on the ground, and then so you can't really lose from there. It's just extremely powerful. Another cool thing as well is that Endless Legion is obviously a card that we're going to be resourcing very often. So if you happen to have an Endless Legion in your resource row and you happen to have a tech in play, and you play your Starhawk, you can also play your Endless Legion from your smuggle, and that will cost you, so basically 16 plus the, so that's 18, that costs you 9. So for the same price as a Starhawk, so you play Starhawk, so presumably you got 9 resource already. On the turn after, you can simply just smuggle Endless Legion out. So you don't even need to have it in your hand, assuming you got a tech in play, of course. So it's basically and this deck gives it gives like the deck an insane like powerful late game. The Starhawk has really made the late game of Han a lot better, and the fact that you are running blue leaders as is in and Han Solo really helps against aggro a lot, because now you get some really flexible answers as well. So obviously this deck has a tremendous amount of different options. It's a little bit overwhelming to kind of guess what you actually need, because Han is a deck that really depends on the meta to operate, but I've been really happy with the result I had with this deck. I don't know if the Endless Legion Starhawk is just a meme, or if it's gonna stay, or maybe I'm just gonna cut it down to maybe 1 or 2 copies of Endless Legion, because I believe the Starhawk on its own is gonna be very strong in this deck. And in the sideboard, we got a lot of text against control. You might be surprised to see Relentless, but Relentless is a great card. If you're playing against control, you want to have a Relentless whenever you're going to be playing Endless Legion. And against control, hardcasting Endless Legion is really not that difficult. You just need to get up to 16 resources, 15 resources if you use Han Solo's ability. And the good thing is that obviously you're gonna be wanting to go for Endless Legions fairly often against control. As you get to those resources, then you get to flood the board and you can put a Relentless in play. That's just something that is very scary for control. You can even combine it with Kira plus Relentless, very hard to beat. We got once again, the sideboard is still a work in progress. We got Salvage, which is basically the Palpatine Reader for a vehicle. We do play quite a few vehicles. Palpatine Readers on Starhawk to play it over and over again can be very powerful. So it's kind of like stuff that I'm still kind of testing out. Anyway, so that was it for my my Han vehicle, my Han green vehicle combo, Starhawk combo deck. It's a deck I'm really proud of. It's by far the deck I have the most fun playing with. And I'm really excited to see if this is going to be good or not. And let's see what is going to end up making the final cut. But once again, it's really going to come down to the meta. The Starhawk, you currently pick up the Starhawk card market for 11 euros. I think it's a card that is likely to see some competitive play. I think the ability is so powerful. And yes, of course, it just dies through removal. But 9 health is not something that many decks can kill. Just be careful that sometimes it is totally worth it to not use the ambush, just to keep your Starhawk nice and healthy and increase your chance of your Starhawk actually surviving, which once again, some situations can win you the game. So it really depends on what you're playing against. If you have a deck that really is using damage to kill units, then you might want to keep the Starhawk nice and healthy. And that was it. Thank you so much for following these videos. So I see if I will see if I'm able to. I hope everybody had a great pre-release, and I'll see if I can find more lists that I can show you guys. As kind of this short like preview, and obviously as soon as the meta gets a little bit more settled and as I get a bit more experience running the different decks, I'm gonna go back into going my in-depth video where I really go into a lot of details on the different deck list. Anyway, thank you very much for following that video, and I'll see you next time.